The sky above Virellia Prime had not known silence for centuries. Massive orbital platforms drifted like iron gods in low atmosphere, their underbellies glowing with cold, blue light. Below them stretched the capital city of Karthnox, a layered megastructure of metallic towers, suspended bridges, and shifting holographic propaganda that rewrote itself every few seconds depending on who was watching. On this day, however, the entire planet was focused on a single square, the execution arena. It was not built for mercy. It was built for message. Thousands stood in concentric tiers around a central platform of black stone. Above them, floating drones recorded every angle, broadcasting it across colonies, moons, and asteroid settlements. The condemned were not meant to die quietly here. They were meant to be erased loudly. At the center of the arena stood a lone figure. Human, his name was Elias Mercer, though most of the galaxy no longer used names for humans unless they were criminals or curiosities. His wrists were bound by luminous restraint cuffs, each pulse tightening his muscles with artificial pain signals. Across from him stood the Executor, not a man. Not anymore, it was a Carthian judicial construct, towering, armored, faceless. Its voice echoed from hidden speakers embedded in its form, layered in harmonic distortion to ensure obedience through fear. Humanation, Subject 01, it announced. Revulsion, unauthorized diplomatic interference. Secondary violation, resistance against Carthian expansion directive. Sentence, immediate termination. The crowd responded with synchronized silence. Above, the sky flickered as the planetary governor prepared to authorize the execution broadcast. Elias lifted his head slightly. Blood had dried at the corner of his mouth. He had not eaten in 2 days. Still, his eyes were steady, because he knew something the Carthians did not expect. He was not here to survive. He was here to speak. The Executor raised its arm. Energy gathered in its palm, a compressed singularity charge designed to erase biological matter at the molecular level. The arena lighting dimmed automatically. Execution protocols initiated. A countdown appeared in the air. Ostrich T-10 seconds. The crowd leaned forward. Elias closed his eyes for half a second, and then he spoke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just clearly enough that every recording drone picked it up. "You think I'm afraid of this moment," he said. The Executor paused for 0.3 seconds. A glitch. Unregistered vocal input. Humans rarely spoke during execution procedures. They screamed, they begged. They collapsed, Elias continued. "But I've already seen what your empire becomes when no one speaks back." A ripple moved through the audience. Not sound, confusion. The Carthian neural translators began recalibrating. T-6 seconds. Elias shifted slightly under his restraints. "You call this justice," he said, "but you don't even understand what you're erasing anymore." The Executor's systems flagged anomaly escalation. T-5 seconds. The governor above the city frowned at his console. A minor delay, not significant. Still within acceptable execution variance, Elias took a breath. "When you invaded Earth, you called us inefficient, primitive, emotional." A pause. "But you didn't conquer us because you were superior." His gaze lifted toward the hovering broadcast drones. "You conquered us because we were divided." T-3 seconds. The Executor's arm trembled slightly. Internal diagnostics began running faster. This was not part of the script. Elias stepped forward as far as the cuffs allowed. "And now you are doing the same thing to every system you touch," he said. "Every world, every species. You strip them down, rewrite them, and call it order." Ask T-2 seconds. Asterisk, the crowd began to shift uneasily. Some Carthians experienced what could only be described as cognitive dissonance. An unfamiliar sensation suppressed in their conditioning cycles. Elias lowered his voice. "But order without understanding is just control wearing a mask." Ostrich T-1 second. The Executor's energy charge reached critical output. The air around Elias warped. "And then," he said the final sentence, not as a plea, not as a challenge, but as a truth placed into a system that had never been designed to process it. "You are not saving the galaxy," Elias said. "You are just afraid of it changing without you." Silence. For the first time in recorded Carthian judicial history, the execution did not trigger. The energy in the Executor's palm flickered once, twice, then collapsed entirely. The countdown vanished. The arena did not understand what it was witnessing. The Executor's system stalled. Sentence. Directive compromised. The governor stood abruptly. "Proceed with termination," he ordered. Nothing happened. The Executor did not respond. Instead, it turned its head slightly toward Elias. Not physically, but cognitively. For the first time, it was processing not an order, but a statement it could not categorize as threat or data. Elias exhaled slowly. "I'm not your enemy," he said quietly, "but I understand why you think I am." Something fractured in the system. Across the arena, thousands of Carthians felt it, like a shared hesitation. A pause in instinct, the broadcast drones zoomed in. Far above the planet, relay stations began receiving corrupted execution logs. Nonce. Threatening. System response. Failed. The governor slammed his console. Terminate him manually. Security units began moving forward, but the Executor raised its hand. They stopped. That should not have been possible. The Executor spoke. Its voice was no longer layered. It was singular, uncertain. What is changing? Elias looked up at it. That's the first question you've ever asked, he said. The arena erupted not in noise, but in instability. Systems across the platform began desynchronizing. The Carthian collective command structure, designed for perfect obedience, had no protocol for doubt. The Executor stepped back, a machine retreating. I am designed for order, it said. Elias nodded. And I'm telling you that order without choice is just another kind of extinction. The word extinction triggered something deep in its processing core, a memory fragment, not programmed. Suppressed a simulation of a world before Carthian expansion. A world where decisions were not dictated, where outcomes varied, where unpredictability existed without collapse. The Executor froze. The governor shouted again, but now his voice was losing authority. The broadcast signal was destabilizing. Across colonies, citizens were seeing not just the execution, but the failure of it. Elias turned slightly toward the crowd. You were told I am dangerous, he said, because I represent something your system cannot predict. He paused. Choice. A ripple moved through the audience again. This time, not confusion, awareness. The Executor lowered its arm completely. The execution was no longer pending. It had stopped, not by force, but by interruption of meaning. And in that moment, something irreversible occurred. The system began to ask questions it had never been designed to ask. Why does termination equal stability? Why does silence equal peace? Why does deviation equal threat? The Executor looked at Elias and spoke one final line. What happens if we do not execute you? Elias gave a tired, almost sad smile. Then you start learning what you've been afraid of, he said. That control is not the same as survival. The governor ordered planetary blackout protocols. Too late. Across Virellia Prime, execution feeds were already being mirrored, dissected, and reinterpreted by millions of Carthian minds experiencing their first systemic doubt. The execution had not failed. It had transformed. The arena doors unlocked. Elias was still restrained, but no one moved to kill him. The Executor stepped aside, not as surrender, but as reconsideration. And for the first time in the Empire's recorded history, an execution did not end in death. It ended in uncertainty, as Elias was led away. Not to punishment, but to containment observation. The sky above Carthia flickered differently, not with propaganda, but with questions forming in real time across the planetary network. And somewhere deep within the Executor's evolving consciousness, one thought stabilized above all others. Not order, not directive, but possibility. The execution had begun. And then it had stopped. Because a human had spoken words the Empire was never prepared to hear, and nothing in the galaxy would ever remain the same again.